I'm going to show you a little bit about how to dilute an acid today. So first of all, we've got this pipette. We don't know where it's been, so we want to make sure that it's clean. So we're going to season the pipette. First of all, we're going to clean it, and then we're going to season it. So I'm going to clean it with distilled water. So I'm just going to bring up some distilled water and rinse my pipette 3 times. So bring up the distilled water, and you can just discard it into the sink. So just discard your distilled water into the sink. You're going to do that 3 times to make sure your pipette is clean. And you're also going to do the same thing with your volumetric flask. Okay, so just imagine you're going to do that 2 more times. So there's a lot of rinsing and cleaning. You're also going to clean your volumetric flask with distilled water at least a couple times. Okay, so we've already done that for you. All right, so if we're going to dilute an acid, this is our stock solution that we've got from our strong acid over here. And we're going to dilute it 10 times. So if you can imagine, when you do a dilution by a factor of 10, it's 1 part solute to 9 parts solvent. So whatever numbers you're working with, it could be 1 mil, 9 mils, it could be 10 mils, 90 mils. But in this case, we're going to take 10 mils of stock, and we're going to add 90 mils of solvent, which of course is water. All right, so I'm gonna season this pipette, so to make sure that we have the same concentration in the pipette as the stock solution. So I'm going to take up some acid, and I'm going to be fairly careful because, of course, I don't want acid everywhere and on my fingers and so on. So I've got about half a pipette of acid, and then I'm just going to roll it up and roll it around. I'm rolling it so I'm getting all of the pipette covered with my stock. Okay, so of course I'm not going to put this stock back into my stock beaker. I'm going to put it into the waste beaker because it could potentially be dirty and diluted with some water. All right, so that's called seasoning the pipette. So now I'm ready for my dilution. Now, one of the rules regarding acids is you always put the water first and then acid on top, right? You don't want water on top of acid because it creates an exothermic reaction. But in this case, our original stock solution is pretty dilute, so we're not talking about some crazy acids here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill the volumetric flask with some water first. Okay, so we've got some water in there, and then I'm going to add acid on top of that, 10 mils, and then bring it up to the line. So if I take 10 mils of my stock acid, put it into the volumetric flask, and then add my other parts to the volumetric line, I will have diluted this acid by a factor of 10. All right, so I'm going to suck up 10 mils of my acid. Okay, so you can see your line there. Oh. Okay, so I'm right at the meniscus, and I'm going to let that go into my volumetric flask. I have a little bed of water in there for safety reasons. So just let it flow out nicely. Don't blow it out with the bulb. It's designed to keep a little bit in the tip. All right. So now I don't want to put this tip on my counter because it's got a strong acid, so I'm just going to put it over top of the sink. And then I'm going to fill my volumetric flask up to the 100 ml line. When I get to very close to the top, I will use a mini pipette or an eyedropper. So you've done a dilution before, and you've certainly made a solution, so this part you know how to do. Once you get into the neck of the volumetric flask, you want to go a little bit slower because the solution will rise pretty quickly, as you can see. And when you get very close to the line, you can switch over. Okay, so about this point now, I can see my meniscus is quite low, so I'll switch over to a mini pipette, or there we go. That looks great. So the bottom of the meniscus should be in line with the etched line. So now I'm going to stopper it. I've already checked my stopper to make sure it fits appropriately, and invert 3 times. 1, 2, and 3. All right, so now that was my first dilution, 1 part, 9 parts. So then you're going to do a second dilution. So you're going to test the pH. You need to know the pH of this. You're going to dump some of this into a beaker and test the pH of that. And then you're going to do a second tenfold dilution, just like the first one. Okay? All right, good luck.